Well, hello, everybody. Glad you're here. And this is something Mike and I have talked about doing, I guess, for a number of weeks. And I'm glad we're able to do it today. I'm Jim Martin. I'm a partner with Hope Network. And many of you know Mike Cope, who is Director of Ministry Outreach at Pepperdine. And this is co-sponsored by Pepperdine and Hope Network. And I also serve as Vice President of Harding School of Theology in Memphis. Mike and I both have served churches for a lot of years, and we talk to a lot of ministers, a lot of different ministers, some of you that are on this call right now. And one thing we wanted to do today is to try to say something that could possibly give us more energy and joy. And so we're going to talk about 8 ministry practices that will help us all keep our sanity in a very tough time. And not only will we benefit by it, but our families and ultimately our congregations. Mike?
Thanks, Jim. And it's good to do this with you, my friend.
Yeah.
Jim and I are a couple old guys who spent our lives in ministry, and we both had stressful things to face through the years, but I think we would both say that this is pretty unique. And so our hearts go out to you. Many of you I see on here have been on a session or two that I've done, probably the same with Jim, but the months have rolled by now, and it seemed appropriate to pull us back together and evaluate. And I think I can assure you that Jim and I are not going to teach you anything you don't already know today. This is going to kind of be an exercise in reminding us to stop and breathe and remind us of the things that we kind of already know inside, but maybe in the midst of everything have forgotten. And one of the things we want you to know is that this is unique by any measure. That's almost become trite to say, but this is a unique time. And you weren't trained for this in seminary. No amount of background could get you ready for all that's been faced the last 4 months. And one of the problems is we don't know how long this is going to go. There you are in church leadership, most of you, and you don't know, am I going to be pushing forward for a couple more months, or is it going to be another year? On one hand, you've got people complaining because you're not fully back where they think you ought to be. And on the other hand, some are saying, look, Andy Stanley is already canceled for the rest of 2020. You know, and so I know it feels at times like you can't win. I thought a young minister passed this along to me, and I thought I would share it today. This is kind of a picture of what ministry is like right now. People will always have something to say. 2 people on donkey's back, poor animal. How cruel he's letting his wife walk. How stupid he's by letting his wife take the ride alone. And then fools don't even know how to utilize the donkey. And he sent that to me and said, that's what it feels like for me right now. All the way from how we should be doing our online services to when we ought to go back. And so just quickly, the whole coronavirus episode has been traumatic for some of you personally, because you've been trying to hold the hand virtually of people who are suffering with it. As a dad, I hold my breath with my son, who's a physician, and my other son is a family therapist in New York City. And you've got people you're concerned about, but it's also the quick learning of technology many of you had to do. I'm guessing a lot of us wish we'd had one less textual course in seminary and one more course on how to do Facebook Live or whatever avenue you've used to try to connect with people. 2020 began with a lot of churches doing series because of the nature of 2020 vision, that this is going to be the year of our sharpening our vision. But little did we know that it would be so many unpredicted things that would help the church sharpen its vision. And then layered on top of that, all the social unrest, the deaths of Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd. And then suddenly there you are, not even able to connect eye to eye and coffee cup to coffee cup with members of your church, trying to negotiate the many different feelings people have and how to think of protests and Black Lives Matter and so on. And then the next thing we knew, every single thing is political. It doesn't help that it's an election year, as you well know, but everything has become political. The wearing of masks is a political statement. What one thinks of the protests, how quickly your church was willing to meet again. It all gets caught up into this discussion of cancel culture and whether we are ticking too far to the right or too far to the left. And I've personally heard from many young ministers saying, I don't know what to do. And what I've realized is for many of them, it's a level of depression and even grief. One of the things we don't train people enough for in ministry is there's going to be a lot of grief. The grief that'll come in your life. I didn't know my daughter would be sick and would die while I was a minister. I didn't know those things, but the grief that some are feeling now of having dear friends leave their church because they're disappointed in how the church has handled this when all you've tried to do is your very best. Well, some of you have heard me say before, I'm a runner, lifelong runner, and I had to learn early on the difference between stitches and cramps. When you're running, generally you're going to hurt, especially in the beginning or on a longer run, but usually those are stitches. That's the body saying, yeah, you know, we weren't built to do this. And so this split in the side comes, and what you do with stitches is you keep on going, you just keep pressing. But cramps are a very different thing. You cannot run through a cramp. It will win. You've got to stop, rehydrate, rest, massage, and wait. So some of you today have some stitches, I know, and because you follow Jesus Christ and your story is defined by one who died on a cross outside the gates of Jerusalem, you're willing to bear that. But what we're conscious of today is that for some, maybe it's becoming cramps and it sneaks up on you before you know it. And then you try to press through and pretend you're not in grief or depressed or tired or whatever. And the next thing you know, your body is telling you you've made some real mistakes. So that's what we're going to do today. Again, if you came in late, I said Jim and I are going to be telling you things you already know. And it's just the reminder of two older friends who care about you. And one of the things we want you to do is please use the chat room. Some of you are seeing friends here. And as we go along, please just feel free to drop anything that's been helpful to you, any resource, any source of renewal, or just say hi to friends, as it may be. Randy Harris has joined us here because we thought we would step into this with a moment of centering and silence. Randy, thanks. You're like 2 miles away from me, but I hardly ever see you. But would you lead us into this moment?
Sure. Silence is not the solution to all the world's problems. You also need a good warm chocolate chip cookie, but it'll solve almost everything else. And if Scripture is to be believed, God is as close to you as your own breath. And the first act of worship is always to attend, to listen, to pay attention. So we're just going to take a couple of minutes to be silent. We'll only do a couple of minutes because after that, Mike gets really antsy. Nothing has to happen. No expectations, no demands, no agenda. We're just going to sit with the one that we love and trust for a couple of minutes and breathe. And I have a timer set. You don't have to worry about that. So just sit quietly with each other and with God for a couple of minutes. Amen.
Thank you, Randy.
Thank you, Randy. I want to walk through 8 practices that will help us move forward. And all 8, each one of these 8 that Mike and I will mention, they all deal with how we function, choices we make. Here's the first one. Get some rest. Get some rest. I don't know anybody who is working harder than ministers, especially right now. And these last few months since March have just been brutal for a lot of ministers. And sometimes when we don't know what to do, we just keep pushing and rushing and trying to figure out what we need to do next. And yet, the truth is, if we're in this for the distance, if we're in this as a sprint, all ministry is done through our bodies. And my body needs Sabbath rest, the rhythm of creation where God creates, but there was Sabbath. And one of the best things we can do is to put a rhythm and back into our lives, a rhythm of rest. Years ago, when I first got out of college, I went to the University of North Texas. I graduated and I drove for UPS for about a year. My route was downtown Dallas. What I loved about that job is that I worked very hard all day long. And then at the end of the day, I was done. I didn't think about that job at night. I didn't think about the work. I was done. Ministry, as you all know, is not like that. I mean, it is always there. I don't know a to-do list that ever gets finished. And so one of the best pieces of encouragement Mike and I can give right now is the importance of getting rest. I love this quote by Alan Fadling in his book, An Unhurried Life. It takes trust in God's faithfulness to choose to stop our work. And so I don't know what that looks like for you right now. For some of us, it might be that I don't spend every evening working, or it might be that I go back to taking a day off, even though there's a part of me that says I don't have time to do that, but yet I need to do that. And I need a vacation, and trying to figure out maybe how that could work. That's the first one I want to mention, just the need for rest.
Jim, I grew up hardcore Church of Christ, and philosophy was work now, rest later. And we sang from the Red Book, toiling on, work for the night is coming. And I remember as a young minister that I was preaching 3 different sermons a week, and, but there was a sense that this endless working was discipleship.
Yeah.
That it was kind of ingrained in me, but what I had to learn the hard way is that sometimes lurking beneath that, there are things that are not as healthy. Do you think that's right?
I think that's exactly right. And I experienced much the same, Mike, that understanding of just keep pushing. I think that's right. Yeah.
Sometimes our identity is tied up so much, and I'm not indicting others here. I'm telling my own story. But for people with workaholic tendencies, this has been a golden era right here, because nobody can stop you, no spouse, no children, because you're doing the Lord's work. But the truth is that, as you said, Jim, our bodies weren't meant to go endlessly with no respite. And so I remember saying this on a call one time. I don't think this person is on there. If they are, I apologize. I certainly won't mention you by name. But this person got upset with me, like I'm underplaying the role of the minister right now. And I had the privilege, because I came from multi-staff churches, and it's not like that when you're the only minister. And I said, I don't know what to say to you other than you may just have to trust me on this one, that what you're doing will work until it doesn't work. And so find some Sabbath rest. I like that quote you used, and there's something like that from Eugene Peterson, that practicing Sabbath, or maybe it's Brueggemann, I think it was Brueggemann, practicing Sabbath is a radical trust in God.
Yeah.
That he's able to carry this when you don't.
Mm-hmm.
And so the rest may be taking some vacation time for the rest of summer. It may be making sure you get a day off. I see one guy on here who reported to our little cohort that he'd been 10 days without even an afternoon off. That was early on. And I know early on we kind of had to sprint a little bit. But to build on that, when the second practice is we've got to practice basic principles of self-care.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this gets back to what Jim said. I think at the center of our faith is what Richard Hayes called Paul's master story, Philippians 2. We all believe in self-giving love. But sometimes we forget that we're not Gnostics, that even the story of Philippians 2 is an incarnation story. And the story of Jesus involves getting away. It involves time of rest and reflection. And self-care can become a very selfish, self-centered, very pop thing, but it doesn't have to be that. It can be Christians admitting that we are made by God with bodies, and what we do with these bodies matter. Mm-hmm. I think of endless discussions I was in seminary over what it means. Love your neighbor as yourself. Does that mean you are to love yourself? Or is it just presuming that? And I love what Landon Saunders said, which is, well, loving yourself is not the point. But it's usually true that you won't love your neighbor until you have loved yourself. Mm-hmm. And that is what we're saying here, is the whole point here isn't self-care, but it's likely that we won't continue in the works of service we want until we have taken care of ourselves. And so the things I'm going to suggest are, again, things you know, like exercise. And I know for some, maybe that feels easy for me to say because nothing's hindering me right now from running or working out. But even if there is something with you, to find some kind of exercise, whether it's rigorous walking or slow walking. I read recently a report on what 20 seconds of backing away from your desk and rolling your arms does. It brings joyful explosions all over your body, just to move a little bit, just to raise the heartbeat some. Second, to get outside. Now, that's part of the challenge in the last 4 months, because lurking outside is this virus, but we know there are ways to be outside safely. And again, a study I read recently said you're better off health-wise to get outside for a while. And if you can't get outside, look outside. And if at the moment you're at a cubicle where you can't look outside, every once in a while, pull up pictures of the outside. And that seems so artificial, but they said, no, it actually works. That when I get my mind into the outside, and I see ministers on here from Colorado and California and Washington. We envy you if you've got a state park that's almost isolated right now, because there are also people here. I see you, Joe, you're smiling. I'd like to be in Washington. But we can all find some way to get outside and move a little bit. Third, eat responsibly. We all deserve a scoop of Bluebell or whatever your local decadent ice cream is. But we also know there are principles of eating. Some of us on this call have recently worked through a book called Faithful and Fractured, a study of ministers that said, for some reason, ministers are among the worst eaters in the United States. And for me, this isn't just a weight thing. It's that the body needs some fuel. And when I'm depressed, I want to turn to something in overabundance that may not serve me well long term. And then finally, I just mentioned now basic principles of mindfulness to do what Randy just taught us, that there need to be times during the day when I just take some deep cleansing breaths and I speak to myself the words that I'm the beloved of God. And filming this sermon on time will not make me the beloved of God. And holding my church together during a pandemic will not make me the beloved of God. But just to breathe in and out that I'm a person of value, and you can almost feel your heart rate come back down and your mind begin to refocus in that. Jim, anything else you want to add to that? What comes to your mind when you think of self-care?
Right now, the physical part of this, Mike, my wife and I have gone to the gym for a long time, and of course all that stopped, and we started walking, and we both got to where we really enjoyed that, and we were breathing the fresh air, and we were seeing neighborhoods we've never seen, and I don't know, there's something just very refreshing about that. But yeah. Let me move to number 3, to be intentional about looking for moments of joy. You know, a lot of us right now, at least in this country, we're waiting for joy. Are we going to have football games? Are we going to be able to go to games? Are we going to do this in the fall? And you're just waiting. And there really is something to be said for these plain vanilla moments of joy that you and I can experience very regularly. I've got a friend in Waco, where we lived for a lot of years, and his name is Scott. And a long time ago, Scott and I went to a Rangers game, and we walked into to the ballpark, and of all times, this was dollar hot dog night. And we looked at one another, and we smiled at, and we were like kids. We each ordered 3 hot dogs and plenty of grilled onions and all that. And we sat down and just had such fun. That's been almost 20 years ago. And to this day, I did this not long ago with him. I will call him in the middle of my workday, and this call might last 5, maybe 10 minutes. And I'll say, Scott, is it dollar hot dog night? And he's in construction and has a lot of responsibility. He'll just start laughing. Oh, if it was only dollar. And so we'll go back. Well, what that did for a few moments, Mike, is it just brought back this memory. And I felt that way all over again. It was just, I was smiling as I was talking to him. And then we hung up. It was not a big deal, but it was a shared memory. And all of us that are a part of this call, we probably have these moments with a variety of people that we could relive for a moment. Sometimes I can experience moments of joy by just intentionally doing small things that I enjoy. For instance, eating a piece of dark chocolate for me. Eating Mexican food. No, here in Memphis, we're not going to the restaurant, but they can bring it to our car. Riding my bike, going for a brisk walk. There's a bookstore in Oxford, Mississippi, Square Books. It's where John Grisham kind of got his start. In fact, he still sends autographed copies of several cases of his books to this bookstore after every one is published. I love that bookstore. It's a wonderful independent bookstore. Well, can't go there right now, or we're not going there right now. I'll go online and look around their website and just remember spending hours in that bookstore. But these moments that I can create on purpose instead of waiting. So I guess there's two things I want to stress here. One is I can use my memory to recreate or revisit pleasant experiences. Charlotte and I do that with our vacations. We'll say, remember when we went to, and we'll relive something all over again. The other thing I can do is be intentional about just doing these small things that would bring me moments of joy. That's that.
I love that, Jim. And
Thank
some
you.
people are dropping into chat here. I want to encourage others of you to do it. What's something joyful in the last 7 days that that maybe you couldn't write a book about, but meant a lot to you? One of the things for me is I turned 64 later this week. And so forever I've been getting ready to sing the Beatles song when I'm 64, you know. So the 3 grandkids came over and learned the song. One had the tambourine and one, I guess, some maracas, and the other was the singer. And we just let it go. And I do hope there's no video of this being distributed any place, but I played guitar and sang, and we just had a blast. And it's funny to me how healing that was as I look back. Of course, I know this is stereotypical, a granddad and his grandkids, of course, but it's that we weren't doing anything really big here. It was just being together. I've talked a lot about how I've been to some amazing games in my life. I grew up in Missouri. We were a newspaper family, so we always could get World Series tickets. And when I grew up, it was a good time to be a Cardinals fan. So I've been to World Series to see the Cardinals in 64, 67, 68, 82, 85. And my family snagged tickets to the game of the century, University of Texas against University of Arkansas in 1969.
Oh, wow.
I've been at some great games, but my favorite games were just in the backyard when the boys were little, or now with my grandkids. The big ones, I'm thankful for those in my life. So what we want to, all we're saying here is find the truth of the book of Ecclesiastes. You know, Ecclesiastes, it's just, there's this wonderful stream of pessimism from beginning to end, but in the middle of it, the one consistent command is find joy in this day. Find joy in your food. Find joy with your friends. Find joy in your work. Just a little bit of good creation theology. This is the day the Lord has made. I want to build on that because the joy takes me into the next one, and that is invest in and rely upon friendships. I hope you all are doing that, especially right now when it feels to me, from what I'm hearing from so many ministers, is church feels tense right now. When are we going back? How are we going back? Are you going to make us wear masks? Will we be able to sing? What do you think about what the governor in whatever state has said to us? And Facebook is crazy. Twitter is crazy. A friendship that is safe, a friendship that's mutual, and a friendship that's low demand. Those are all important. You need some of those kind of friends that don't get mad if you went a couple days without calling or texting. And very often, by the way, these need to be friends outside the church. Maybe they're other minister friends, inside or outside of Churches of Christ. I'm assuming most here are from Churches of Christ. One of the things that has helped me survive the last 4 months is every Tuesday, I have one more Zoom meeting, but I don't ever miss this one. It's with 4 of my best friends in the world. The 5 of us get together and solve the world's problems. And it's safe. There's somebody from Vermont, and somebody from Abilene, somebody from Searcy, somebody from Nashville. But we gather in a place of safety, and all week long, the 5 of us, we just call it the 5 smooth stones. You can say anything, ask anything. Right now, a few people are in a setting where the whole cancel culture debate is going on, and they just can't win. They can't be conservative enough for one group, and they're never woke enough for the other group. And so we have each other, and we know, you can make a mistake with us. You can misspeak. You can say something. It'll be okay. But it's not all about solving problems. It's just being with somebody who knows you and loves you. Some of you on this call, I've been in some cohorts with, and anytime we do a survey of a cohort meeting, and what do you think of this and this and this, it doesn't matter who we brought in as a resource for it. The highest ratings will be for dinner time or the time just to hang with people. Because a lot of what we need in ministry is just a moment to reflect in a safe place with friends.
Well, that's helpful, Mike. I want to kind of move to this next one, and it's along the same line, really.
Yeah.
And that is to be willing to talk to someone who might be helpful. To talk to someone who might be helpful. I'm going to give some examples of that. That person might be, for instance, just a wise friend who, when I talk to this person gives me life. This is not a person that's going to burden me with more and more negativity, but this is a person I just feel better when I talk to him or her. It's a wise friend who gives me life. Yesterday, I was in the office. I get this call, and it's these two newly retired professors at Baylor. And they both went to our church there. And I answer the call. They're both on the phone, and they're laughing. And they say some funny things for a moment, and then just a couple of words of affirmation. It was my birthday yesterday. And just a couple of words of affirmation. And what I know about each one of those brothers is they're very wise, and I'm better when I'm around them. And you may know people like that in your life, just people. There's just some wisdom with this certain person. This person might be a mentor coach, somebody that's been coaching you, somebody that's kind of been in a mentoring relationship with you, and I found that very, very helpful. This person may be a spiritual director. Some of you perhaps have had someone in your life in that role. The one I want to spend a little more time on for just a moment, it can be helpful at times to talk to a therapist. And what's interesting right now is you can actually do a lot of this by Zoom. As opposed to having to show up in an office and that sort of thing. Now, I've done this a couple of times, but it was not smooth for me, Mike. I fought it. I fought it, and I was fighting my wife because she knew I needed help, and I didn't need help. People come to me and ask me what to do. And if I just, my thinking was, this goes back to some of what you were talking about earlier, if I would just try harder, it would get better.
Yeah.
And I was sinking. I was never what would typically be termed clinically depressed, but I was sinking down. I remember one day in Kansas City just looking up, and I felt like I was in a dark hole, and I did not know how to get out. And to talk to a Christian therapist every few weeks, along with some other things. There were other things involved, but that was huge. That was so helpful to me. And I did this again in Waco after a season. But there just comes, we're in such a difficult time. And I would just encourage us all, don't do what I did and, fight it. When actually I could get help so much more quickly. Anyway, that just might be something to consider. And I'm going to tell you, I would consider doing it again. I'm not at a point, I'm not this person that has all this down. I'm still trying to navigate life. And I just found those experiences helpful.
Jim, what would you say to somebody who says, yeah, how do you get one of those people? Maybe not so much a therapist, but a mentor or a spiritual director.
Yeah, I can probably say more about spiritual director, I would say his name is Randy Harris, and here's his telephone number. He'll know. I'd probably
Yeah.
say that.
Yeah.
For therapists, what I've found is when people, especially ministers, have lived in a community for a while, they often know certain people who are especially helpful. We've lived in Memphis now almost 7 years. I have some names now that I didn't have when I first came. Would you add anything to that, Mike?
No, I just think sometimes when people are out in ministry, you have to do a little digging. But if you ask around, and again, you were kidding about Randy, but there are people like Randy and you that I know if somebody contacted you, you would probably know somebody who does that, somebody who might be available, especially now that we're fluent with Zoom. It doesn't even have to be somebody in your city. A sixth thing we wanted to mention is that it's a time to lean into spiritual disciplines. As a young minister, boy, I hit the spiritual disciplines. I was just determined to pray 40 minutes a day. And the longer life went on, the more I realized that had faded and had become anemic. And then somebody taught me that you don't have to always pray. Sometimes you just have to say your prayers.
Yeah.
And that's when the joy of entering into the life of the church and the Psalms and the Lord's Prayer became so helpful. One of the most helpful things to me, today is the 203rd day of the year. So that meant I prayed Psalm 53 this morning, pray through all 150 and then start back over again. And, but honestly, why would I talk about spiritual disciplines? Randy's joined us in the call. And Randy, I've heard you mentioned to some groups already the idea of taking 10-minute vacations through the day or something. Can you talk about that just a little?
Yeah, I think, over the long haul, if you practice silence seriously, it will eventually crush you. It has to. And out of that crushing, God will build something else up. But right now, silent prayer shouldn't be a burden. It should be a vacation. And I'm trying to tell people, take 10 or 15 minutes a day and just go and say, okay, God, I'm gonna be here for the next 10 or 15 minutes. I don't have any expectations. I don't have any demands. I don't have any agenda. I'm just gonna hang out here with the one I love. And it will probably be the only time of the day when there is absolutely nothing expected of you. Mm-hmm. And it's just like a 15-minute vacation. And right now, that's probably the greater gift of silence. There'll be time to do that hard, long work of tearing down and building up. But right now, just to take that little time and say, the whole world doesn't depend on me. God, I'm just going to hang out here with you, and nothing will happen in the next 15 minutes that is so important. That's going to pull me away from you. So that's what I'm suggesting. Not bear the burden of it, but take the relief of it, and be disciplined about it. And you need that vacation every day.
Thank you, Randy. Jim, go ahead.
All right, number 7, commit to becoming a non-anxious presence. Commit to becoming a non-anxious presence. Some of you will know that this is a part of systems leadership, systems thinking. Becoming a less anxious or non-anxious presence as a leader is a process. It's not something you eventually attain. What's happening in a lot of churches right now, we've got low clouds of anxiety all around us. I'm looking outside. There are gray clouds in the sky. It rained a little while ago. These are dark gray clouds of anxiety, and they're coming at us from all directions. There is social unrest, as Mike mentioned. There is a health crisis, a financial crisis, and oh yeah, we're going to we've got a presidential election coming up. Then we start talking about getting back together in a building as churches. And we our elders, if you have shepherds in your church, they come in with their own anxiety. All that anxiety feeds on something. And what it often feeds on is our raw emotion, our raw emotion. And so as a minister, I come into that. My goodness, it's just such an anxious environment. This one has certain opinions about mask and no mask, and we're for this political party and we're for the other party. And it's very intense. The anxiety in me is my response to any threat. And so the threat I feel as a minister quite often is these elders are doing church all wrong. They're messing it up. They're going in the wrong direction. They're shooting from the hip. I've heard from 2 or 3 different ministers in the last 3 weeks that an elder in a meeting, most of these were Zoom meetings, an elder in a meeting said, "That's it, I'm done. I'm sick of this." Well, as a minister, I'm going to have some anxiety. The question is, what am I going to do with it? Here's what I want. I want to learn to be a calmer presence. And boy, the spiritual disciplines are huge for this. I want to learn to be a calmer presence so that the anxiety in me doesn't take over, but instead I have enough margin to think. To think. Right now, what's going on in a lot of congregations, there's not a lot of thinking, just reacting.
Mm-hmm.
Some of you know the name Todd Bolsinger. He's done a lot on this at Fuller. He was quoting the other day Ronald Heifetz, adaptive leadership, who talks about in organizations, there's the temptation to stay on the floor when we need to go to the balcony. And as a minister, what that means is I need to take a few steps back and just ask myself, what's happening here? What's the dynamic at work? How am I feeding into the way these elders are acting, and how is the way they're acting impacting me? And I'm going to have to go up to the balcony and kind of look at that big picture if I'm going to be any good once I get down on the floor among them. I found that image helpful. I want to wrap this up by a few suggestions. Here's number one. I want to learn to be a less anxious or a non-anxious presence. And I begin doing that with the spiritual disciplines. Number two, I want to learn how to think clearer myself and not just react. Somebody said that when we react, we typically either run, we flee, freeze, or want to fight. One of those 3. Well, I'd like to think. I think as a minister, I can contribute most to this church if I can keep my wits about me. Number 3, what you can do in your thinking is go back to what is fixed. Go back to Scripture. Go back to what doesn't move, to who God is, and what God has done in this overarching plan that's unveiled from Genesis to Revelation, the cross, the resurrection. But I know I do as a minister. I need to ground myself in what is fixed if I'm going to be able to deal with all of this other. Here's a number 4. I want to learn to be more empathetic. It doesn't, sometimes you just hear all this stuff from these people and it just sounds nuts. And maybe it is. But what I want to ask myself is, what is there about this particular perspective that is helping this guy? What's he getting out of this viewpoint? Is there a way I could try to see things from his point of view? it won't may not make it right, may not make it make sense, but what it can do is change my tone as a minister. And that's huge. And then I can work to stay connected emotionally. And this is what's hurting a lot of us right now, is we've been living off of Zoom for so long. I've had these conversations with Mike over the last, three weeks, maybe 4 weeks.
Yeah.
It's pretty good when we're face to face like this on a screen. I would rather be in his office. It's hard. We can get some things done like this, but in terms of emotional connection with these elders, it is awfully hard to maintain that by Zoom. And I want to learn to be more creative in this. That's enough. If you want some help for all of this, Managing Leadership Anxiety by Steve Cuss, C-U-S-S. Managing Leadership Anxiety. That might be a beginning.
Thanks, Jim. And Valerie's going to type on here 3 podcasts that I listen to regularly that are on this theme. And one of them is by Steve Cuss, and he calls it Managing Leadership Anxiety. But there are 2 others, one by Scazzaro and one by Jack Shitama. But we'll put those out there in case anyone is interested. I'm guessing everyone has had the experience of walking into a restaurant where there's a party going on and you suddenly realize you are the only sober person present. And it's an odd thing to be in a group like that where only you are sober. But I tell you, that's what it's like to go into a leadership meeting where everybody's going crazy and your emotional temperature stays the same, where you've learned how to hold on to yourself. I've often said I had 7 years of Greek. If I could trade that 7th year of Greek for one class on how to hold on to yourself, I'd love to go back to my early ministries and be a more mature version of me. I'd love to go in, and as somebody gets mad and as somebody yells and as somebody accuses, just to stay as a centered person, knowing I'm beloved by God, and to listen and to learn the art of even using deflective humor in the midst of that. By the way, I see some faces of people on here that I know have grown by leaps and bounds the last couple of years in doing that very thing. So there's the list in the chat room of those 3. I'd encourage you to, if you don't ever listen to them, just give it a try. You can learn a little bit more about systems thinking. Probably some of you read Rabbi Friedman's book, Generation to Generation, early on, but it didn't have the meaning it would have now in your life. Well, we're down to number 8. The 8th thing we wanted to say today, the 8th practice, is get ready for it. And I'm speaking to you, a couple of you. You know, I've said this to you. Pay less attention to social media. There's just no other way to say it. I don't know how to redeem Facebook right now. I've really worked to try. I love that, Kyle. No, it's not a personal attack. It maybe is an attack on me. I find it interesting. It's still, for a 64-year-old, relatively new, but boy, it's so difficult. And part of what's difficult is to think of church members the same way when you see them sharing things that are verifiably not true, whether from the left or the right. And the next thing you know, that's just crawling all over you. Now, some of you have learned to be a non-anxious presence, and you can do that, and you find it a joyful way. I try to pop in less frequently and scroll quickly looking for people's kids and their grandkids and something helpful like that. And I've increasingly found there are people, I don't want to block them, I don't want to unfriend them, but I'm just not going to follow them because I'm just not going to read that Tom Hanks is a pedophile. I'm sorry. You can disprove that in about 2 seconds, but the next thing you know, it's on Facebook and it's a fact. So I would encourage us if that's becoming a drain, you don't have to be there. Now, there's part of my work, I need social media. I'm in charge of Harbor, the Pepperdine Bible lectures, and I need social media. I need to connect with a circle of friends there, but I can't be as obsessed with it. I was telling Jim, my good buddy Eddie Sharp had a rule that he taught me early on because he and I were both Little League coaches. And his rule was everyone is 25% better than they appear to be at the Little League field. You can take that one to the bank. Everyone is 25% better than they appear to be there. And he said, if you don't know that rule, you'll never be able to see them again at church, and your heart will change. And maybe that's what we need to learn about Facebook, at least, and Twitter, is everybody's probably 25% better than all their anxieties and angers that are coming out there. Well, we've got just a couple minutes before the hour, and we wanted to say once again, the chat room is wide open, and Jim and I want to encourage everybody, what is something that has helped you be sane? So he and I are going to yammer for another moment or two, but what we'd really love is just everybody, if you don't mind, what's one thing that has helped keep you sane over the last 4 months? And just there, thank you. Just pop them on there, and we'll enjoy that. Jim, a final word of encouragement to people from you?
Yeah, Mike and I wanted to do this because we really care, and we really care about ministers. We care about you. And I want you to know that what you're doing really matters. And you may feel so isolated. You may feel like you're on the backside of Idaho somewhere and nobody knows about your church or you, but you do matter. And most of all, you matter to God. And he notices your work. And he knows how hard this is right now. And Mike and I just wanted to come alongside you for a moment. And thank you for being a part of this, Mike.
Thank you all for these suggestions here. I've been reading them less. I'm dying to know what a therapy tractor is. I don't know if that's a certain category of tractor. You just find that therapeutic. I want to say to you, dear friends, your work in the Lord is not in vain. We didn't sign up for something that's going to be happy every moment. We know that. We got into ministry because we believe the gospel. We got in because we were called, and we don't need to be coddled. We know that. But what we forget sometimes is that there are some basic grooves, some basic routines that will lead us into longer health. And this is a unique time. For Jim and me, it was unique right after 9/11. But it was one thing, and it didn't go on forever. Things, in a sense, started getting back to normal relatively quickly as I look back. But this is waves overlapping. This is COVID-19, social unrest. This is political battles. This is 50 million Americans unemployed. This is a lot of things going on, a new way of doing church. And I know you're up to the task. We will survive this. There will be a day that feels more normal, though that day maybe isn't right now. But if this has sparked something inside of you that tells you, there's a little tugging that says, I'm not well, then I think Jim and I would say, pay attention to that. Don't bury that and go do your next Zoom meeting. Pay some attention to it. At the very least, find a mentor, a friend, a therapist, somebody, and tell them, I think I need to do something to get back on track. I need to process my grief. I need to deal with some depression, my anger toward church members, whatever it may be. But we want to, in joyful note, to be here together today is one of these things Jim talked about. It's a moment of joy. I see your faces, and for some of you, I see your hidden screens. But for most of you, I see your faces, and it's so good to see you. God's blessings on you. Jim and I thought what we might do is just quit talking, and we're gonna hide our screens, and we're gonna leave this going for just a moment for you to continue chatting if you'd like to. We know some of you got to get on to for me 2 o'clock, some of you 3, some of you 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock session. Randy Harris, thanks for joining us and leading us in that moment. Jim, good to work with you, friend.
Good to work with you, Mike.
The Lord bless and keep all of you. May the peace of Christ rest on you. Amen.
Amen.